an amazing group of questions and comments. Thank you so much for all these great comments. The main questions today, and there's more than one, all has to do about that fish that we cooked on Monday's episode. Thanks for joining us today on Questions and Answers. The first question we've got here is from the Scotch Collops episode we did. Hey Townsends, what cool music do you use? All the music that's on our episodes is done by Jim's Red Pants. It's available on our website. And we've done a few episodes, or at least one, where we talk to them specifically. I'll put a link down in the description below where you can hear me interviewing them. Here's a comment that came in on Soup, Stew, and Hash. Why do you call the split pea soup the Green Death? Well, I'll bet that after you eat split pea soup for a couple of weeks or a couple of months or a year or two, you'd call it the Green Death too. Here's an excellent question. It just came in on the channel at large, but we do a lot of episodes, or we refer to suet in a lot of episodes, and we have a specific episode on rendering suet. But here's the question. If you would be so kind, please tell me the difference between suet, tallow, mussel fat, and the like, how they might be processed into usable items for cooking and candle making. They say that online information can be very confusing. Always true, always true. Suet and tallow are basically the same thing. Apparently, some people say that tallow is rendered suet, but basically, same kind of thing. Mussel fat's completely different than suet and tallow. Suet comes from the body cavity inside of the animal. Specifically in a cow, it's called kidney fat. Inside, like pigs, it's called leaf lard. But it's the fat that actually happens around the organs inside the animal, versus muscle fat, which is on the outside of an animal. On their legs, other parts of their body. The real difference is the texture though. The suet fat is very, very hard, very waxy, and has a very high melting point. When you, at room temperature, you can hold it and it's going to be hard like wax. But muscle fat is never like that. It's always, very soft, and you really cannot use it for cooking in the sense that you would use suet, and definitely not for candles. It just won't solidify. It stays in a kind of a mush format. And the rendering, well, again, we've got a great episode on rendering suet. I'll definitely have a link down in the description section to send you off to that wonderful rendering. And we explain muscle fat and we explain suet in that episode in depth, so go and check that video out. Here's a question that came in on one of the Q&As. I've noticed on your website you're offering imitation hog's bladders that you can use to seal jars. How common was this as a method of preservation? How effective was it? I know you're mostly focused on mid to late 1700s, but when the canning process arrived in America in 1812, did it largely replace the hog bladder method of preservation? Hog's bladders were just a means of sealing off the vessel to keep air and dust and other like animals out from under your preserved food items inside the jar. There still had to be some other kind of preservation method that was going on inside the jar, whether things were salted or they were sugared or preserved like jams and jellies, or even with nitrates or something, like you would pickle an item. Really, that hog's bladder is just there to seal it up and to keep things from getting into it. So it's a bit apples and oranges with having to do with the canning method and whether that completely replaced it. Likely hog's bladders and the same kind of sealing methods were being used well into the 19th century. This is a question that came in on that fish episode, and it has to do with how they preserved large quantities of fish in the 18th century. Did they add more salt? Here's the question. How did they preserve large quantities of fish? Did they add more salt after cooking it and place the fish in barrels? Salting fish in the 18th century, you didn't necessarily cook the fish before you salted them. You would prepare them. You would cut open the fish like we did probably. More than likely, they would have been scaled if that was the type of fish, and then cutting off the head, and then putting them right into salt. You wouldn't cook them necessarily, but you would put them right into salt. And at times you might dry the fish instead, or a combination of drying the fish and smoking it to preserve it. If you didn't have enough, sometimes salt goes in with that same process. There are so many different ways that fish can be preserved in kind of similar methods, but they really weren't, it wasn't necessarily cooked and then preserved. It was kind of preserved raw, if it were. The same way that you would do with preserving salt pork or salt beef. These things weren't cooked first. The raw meat was put in there with the salt and the nitrates to preserve it into the future. And normally these salted things were soaked afterwards when you wanted to prepare them into food. You would soak most of that salt out, or else it would be way too salty to eat. Here's one of the great comments. So many people commented on the type of fish, and there seemed to be some controversy or a mix-up maybe about exactly what kind of fish it was that we were using in that episode. Okay, I'm not an expert on fish, and I wasn't necessarily presenting that particular episode, so I'm not sure exactly what kind of fish Deb had at the time. She had whatever was representative of the kind of fish, as close as we could get at that particular moment when we were doing the episode. So whether it was a herring shad or not, we think it was a gizzard shad, but even if it was a carp, like so many people in the comment section were commenting about, really what we were trying to convey in that episode was the means in which it was prepared, the technique for cooking it, not necessarily maybe fish identification. One of the comments was specifically, well, it's definitely not a shad, but you've inspired me to try eating carp rubbed with chili flakes. Exactly, I like that comment. Oh, yeah, and she mentioned the idea of a 20-pound shad, and that was a reference to what they were talking about in the time period. Certainly the fish we were using wasn't a 20-pound fish. And we have a bunch of other questions about, or comments about scaling, and she kind of explained, I'm not sure if it maybe got edited out or kind of truncated a little bit, but the scaling that she was doing on that fish was just to remove the loose scales. Because we weren't even getting close to eating where the fish skin was, it really didn't matter whether the scales stayed on that fish. We just didn't want the loose scales to come around on the other side and get on the eating part of the fish. So she was just scraping with the scales to get rid of any large loose scales. She wasn't actually trying to remove all the scales from the fish. A lot of people are asking about events that are occurring in their part of the country, or about historic sites that are close to them, or even organizations. We've got a specific website that we've set up for that. When people ask questions, we can point them there, and I want you to go check that out. It's called livinghistorynetwork.com. And if you have an organization, or you have a site, or an event, and you want to list it on that site, you can do that there. That is for everyone to use, so make sure to go and check that out. I'll put a link down in the description section. The last of the t-shirts have been shipped out. If you haven't gotten your t-shirt yet, it will arrive very soon in the mail. I hope you enjoy those shirts. We had a lot of fun preparing them and shipping them out. I want to thank everyone for your amazing support. Whether you have purchased a t-shirt, or you help us out on Patreon, you purchase products from our website, all that helps do what we need to do. It has been so busy here. It is very exciting. I really want to thank you for your part in that. Thanks for everything you do, all your support when you like, you share. Thank you so much, and thanks for watching.